She was born on a Federation colony. She wanted to be a ballerina, and by the time she was 7 years old, she had a different name, a different face, and she'd already forgotten her own mother's voice. This is the complete story of a little girl named Annika Hansen, to a Borg drone who helped run an empire of conquest, to one of the most important officers ever to serve aboard a Federation starship, to a starship captain herself. We're covering all of it: birth, assimilation, Voyager, and everything that happened after, including stuff that never made it to the screen, pulled from the official Star Trek novels that Paramount considers part of the wider beta canon. I'm Albie, this is Trexploration, and this is 7 of 9.
Trexploration.
Chapter 1, Annika Hansen.
Our story starts in the year 2350 on a remote Federation outpost called the Tender Colony. A baby girl is born to two exobiologists, Magnus and Aaron Hansen. They name her Annika. Now, Magnus and Aaron weren't your typical Starfleet scientists. They were obsessive, borderline reckless. Their life's work was a single question: do the Borg actually exist? At a time when the Federation barely had rumors and secondhand reports to go on, the Hansens were convinced this cybernetic hive mind was real, and they were determined to prove it, even if it meant putting their own daughter in the path of the most dangerous force in the galaxy. After years of lobbying, the Federation finally relented and gave the Hansens a ship, a small, long-range science vessel called the USS Raven. And when they set out in the early 2350s, they brought 4-year-old Annika with them. For the next several years, the Raven becomes Annika's whole world. She celebrates her birthdays, light years from home, one of them with 6 candles on the cake, and a 7th to grow on. Small detail, but it comes back to haunt her later in ways nobody could have predicted. Magnus, meanwhile, is building something remarkable: a multi-adaptive shielding system designed to let the Raven move through Borg space completely undetected. It works. The Hansens spend years quietly trailing Borg vessels, gathering data that no Federation scientist has ever gotten close to. They even sneak aboard an active Borg cube using bio-dampening technology, walking among drones who have no idea they're there. It's audacious, it's brilliant, and it's about to get all 3 of them killed. Or worse. In 2356, while trailing a Borg cube through a transwarp conduit into the Delta Quadrant, the Raven is hit by an ion storm. The shielding that keeps them invisible for years goes offline. Just for 13 seconds, that's all the Borg need. The cube locks onto them. Magnus tries to mask their warp trail. It doesn't matter. The Borg find the Raven, and assimilation begins.
Chapter 2, 7 of 9, Tertiary Adjunct of Unimatrix 01.
Annika Hansen is 6 years old when the collective gets its hands on her, and because she's a child, the Borg just can't slap implants on her and call it done. Her body isn't finished growing, so they put her into something called a maturation chamber, a kind of forced growth pod that accelerates her physical development, while, at the same time, the collective goes to work erasing who she is. This part of the story is genuinely one of the darkest ideas Star Trek ever put on screen. The Borg spent years systematically dismantling a little girl's mind, her memories, her personality, her sense of being a separate person at all, and rebuilt her into a component. When she finally emerges, Annika Hansen doesn't exist anymore. In her place, 7 of 9, Tertiary Adjunct of Unimatrix 01. For the next 18 years, that's all she is, a drone. Assimilating species, executing the collective's will without question, without doubt, without grief. Even as a drone, in 2368, she and 3 other drones crash land on a planet and find themselves cut off from the hive mind. The other three start to rediscover bits of their individual selves almost immediately. Seven doesn't want that. She's terrified of separation. So terrified that she links the others into a small, temporary collective of her own, just to make the silence stop until the Borg retrieve them all and reassimilate everyone. It's a strange piece of foreshadowing. Even at her most Borg, some instinct in Seven reaches for connection the second she's alone. That instinct is going to define the next chapter of her life.
Chapter 3. Scorpion, a liaison, is born.
By 2374, the USS Voyager, a Starfleet ship stranded 70,000 light-years from home in the Delta Quadrant, finds itself caught between the Borg and something the Borg are actually afraid of, species 8472. A bioship piloting force from fluidic space that's been handing the collective devastating losses. Captain Catherine Janeway makes an extraordinary call. She offers the Borg a deal. Voyager's crew will design a weapon capable of fighting off species 8472 in exchange for safe passage through Borg space. The collective agrees and assigns a liaison to oversee the partnership to make sure Voyager doesn't try anything clever. That liaison is 7 of 9. She's sharp, calculating, completely unbothered by human discomfort, and very obviously planning to assimilate everyone the moment the alliance stops being useful. The Borg Queen will later claim, and this is straight from the show, that Seven was her favorite drone, and that placing her on Voyager wasn't an accident. It was a long game aimed at eventually assimilating Earth itself. The plan falls apart. When species 8472 turns on the Borg ship escorting Voyager, the drones evacuate aboard Voyager itself just before their cube is destroyed. Janeway then makes the second extraordinary call of the episode. Rather than let Seven and the other drones reconnect to the collective, she has the ship's chief engineer sever Seven's neural link entirely. 7 of 9 is now alone in her own head for the first time in 18 years. And she is furious about it. The Doctor, Voyager's holographic physician, gets to work removing what Borg technology he safely can. He manages to strip away the vast majority of her implants and restore most of her human appearance. But some of it has fused too deeply with her biology. It's not coming out without killing her. So, a handful of implants stay. Physical reminders for the rest of her life of what was done to her. When Janeway asks what to call her, she refuses Annika Hansen. She barely remembers being that person. 7 of 9 is the only identity she's ever consciously known. Janeway proposes a compromise. Just 7. She accepts it. Not because she's warming up to anyone, but because functionally, it's efficient.
Chapter 4. Learning to be a person.
This is where the show does something genuinely difficult. It asks the audience to spend years watching someone learn from scratch how to be a human being. 7 doesn't soften immediately. She's combative. She thinks most of the crew's decisions are inefficient. Her first real on-ship conflict comes almost immediately with Chief Engineer B'Elanna Torres in Day of Honor. And it nearly gets the ship destroyed when a group called the Katati, refugees devastated by the Borg, try to steal Voyager's warp core, and they hold 7 hostage in exchange for supplies. 7 ends up building an entirely new generator from scratch to resolve it without giving up either the ship or herself. Then there's The Raven, the episode that finally answers what happened to her parents' ship. 7 starts experiencing visions, a raven, flashbacks to the moment of her assimilation. It turns out a dormant Borg homing beacon aboard her parents' wrecked vessel has reactivated some of her nanoprobes, pulling her toward it almost against her will. She steals a shuttle, crosses into hostile Bomar territory, and Tuvok and Tom Paris have to go retrieve her. When they find the wreck, it's the first time 7 sees the Raven since she was a child, and the first real crack in the wall she's built around her own history. She also starts almost reluctantly becoming a mentor to Naomi Wildman, the ship's youngest crew member, who treats Seven less like a curiosity and more like a friend. And especially Icheb, a Brunali teenager Voyager rescues from a Borg cube in the episode Collective, after his own people handed him over to the Borg as a kind of biological weapon. Seven, who understands better than anyone what it is to be reshaped by the Collective against your will, takes him under her wing. He becomes, in every way that matters, except biologically, her son. But the central relationship of this whole era is Seven and Janeway. Janeway just doesn't tolerate Seven. She actively fights for her, again and again, often against the objections of her own crew. She's part scientist studying a fascinating case, part captain managing a security risk, and increasingly, plainly, something like a mother figure. By the time we get to later seasons, Janeway is willing to put her own career and reputation on the line for Seven's sake, and that bond becomes one of the emotional backbones of the entire show. One of the most quietly devastating episodes is Human Error, where Seven starts secretly running a holodeck simulation of an ordinary domestic life. Dinner parties, a holographic version of Chakotay, a fantasy of just being normal, and ends up so absorbed in it that it costs her professionally and emotionally. When reality and simulation collide, it's Star Trek doing something it rarely gets credit for, showing you that healing from trauma isn't a straight line. And then there's Dark Frontier, where Seven is forced to confront the Borg Queen directly and discovers her father's fate. He was assimilated and turned into a drone, very likely destroyed in the very same confrontation. It's about as close as closure that Seven gets regarding her parents, and it's not much closure at all. Before any of that, though, there's a novel worth knowing about, because it's basically a stealth prequel to ideas the show itself would explore later. Published in 1998, not long after Seven joined the crew, it follows Voyager trying to cross a vast, bureaucratic alien dictatorship to avoid a year-long detour home. The Skeetans see Seven and see only one thing, Borg, and using their telepathic abilities, they start tormenting her with hallucinations and flashbacks, memories of people she assimilated. At points, Seven actually starts slipping into the personality of one specific girl she once helped assimilate, becoming more open, more childlike, almost gentle, before snapping back into her usual self. It's a rough watch, or read, in this case, because it forces Seven to sit with the fact that her trauma and her guilt are the same event, just viewed from opposite ends. She's a victim of the Borg. She's also, mechanically, one of the things that made her people victims too. The novel never lets her off the hook for that, and it doesn't try to. This book actually predates the Voyager episode Infinite Regress, which tackles a strikingly similar idea. Seven's mind getting overwritten by the personalities of people she once assimilated, by about 2 months. As far as anyone can tell, it's a coincidence. Nobody's ever suggested one influenced the other, but it tells you that even other Star Trek writers were independently drawn to the same dark, obvious question about Seven. What happens to the memories of everyone she has ever helped take?
Chapter 5. Getting Home.
In 2378, Voyager achieves something it's been chasing for years, a stable two-way communications link back to the Alpha Quadrant. For the first time since they were stranded, the crew can talk to the families they left behind. Seven is hesitant. She doesn't reach out right away, but eventually, watching how much it means to everyone else, she contacts her aunt, her only living relative, Irene Hansen. Irene is overjoyed, and in a small but telling moment, Seven visibly flinches when Irene calls her Annika. Even reconnecting with family, she holds on to the only name she's ever really known as her, Seven. There's also a wilder detour worth a quick mention at this one point. The entire crew gets kidnapped, has their memories wiped, and is forced into an indentured labor on an alien world. And Seven, of all people, briefly goes by Annika Hansen, again as a planted false identity, working in a factory job with a Borg-grade obsession, for efficiency that drives her coworkers insane. It's one of the stranger what-if detours the show ever takes with her name. Finally, in the series finale, Endgame, and stop here if you haven't seen it. Using a transwarp coil recovered from a future timeline, Voyager makes a desperate, brilliant final jump and arrives home, Earth 2378. 7 of 9, once a 6-year-old girl, ripped out of the Alpha Quadrant by her own parents' obsession, returns to it 22 years later as one of the people who helped get an entire ship's crew home alive.
Chapter 6. Coming home to a world that doesn't want her.
You'd think this is where her hero's journey ends, with a parade. It doesn't. According to canon established in Star Trek Picard, 7 applies to join Starfleet shortly after Voyager's return, with Admiral Janeway personally backing her. By this point, having been promoted, Starfleet says no. Officially, it's about the residual Borg technology still embedded in her body. Unofficially, it's prejudice. Plain and simple, Starfleet doesn't trust an ex-Borg, no matter what she did to get the entire crew home. Janeway is reportedly furious enough to threaten resigning over it. 7 characteristically doesn't want anyone fighting that battle for her. She withdraws her application entirely. Now, the licensed Voyager novels actually dig much deeper into this immediate post-Endgame period. In them, 7 and Icheb are taken into protective custody by Starfleet security during a Borg nanovirus scare on Earth. Icheb's own Borg-suppressed Brunali physiology starts reasserting itself once he's prevented from regenerating normally. The novels also show Icheb's full implants being surgically removed and him enrolling at Starfleet Academy, eventually becoming a science officer. They're not just background characters here, they get full careers, relationships, even a long-running storyline in later novels like Architects of Infinity, where Icheb is shown in a developing relationship with a male crewmate, Lieutenant Finnegan Bryce. That detail matters a lot once we get into what canon eventually does with them.
Chapter 7. The Fenris Rangers.
Rejected by the institution she spent years trying to get home to, 7 joins something rougher, the Fenris Rangers, a loose, unofficial peacekeeping outfit operating in lawless space along the old Romulan neutral zone. The kind of organization that exists specifically because Starfleet can't, or won't, go everywhere. By the time we catch up with her in Star Trek Picard, set roughly 20 years after Voyager came home, she's hardened. Practical, still fundamentally good, but with a much harder edge than the woman who left the Delta Quadrant. The most gut-punch part of this era involves Icheb. In the show's canon timeline, Icheb is captured and lured into a trap by a black market dealer who specializes in harvesting Borg implants from former drones for profit. Icheb is tortured, his remaining Borg implants removed, while he's still alive. 7 arrives too late to save him. She kills the surgeon responsible, and then, at Icheb's own pleading request, she euthanizes him herself, cradling his body, calling him my child. 7 spends roughly the next decade hunting down the one responsible for Icheb's fate.
Chapter 8. A Friendship with Picard. A Second Chance at Starfleet.
It's during this Fenris Rangers period that 7 crosses paths with Admiral Jean-Luc Picard after intervening to help the crew of the civilian ship La Serena during an attack at Vashti. The two of them recognize something in each other immediately. Both are people who spent part of their lives as instruments of the Borg, both still working through what that means about who they are. Picard, famously assimilated as Locutus decades earlier, is one of the only people alive who can talk to 7 without this being theoretical. They both experienced it. When Picard later tries to talk her down from killing Jay, in cold blood, invoking the humanity she's worked so hard to reclaim, 7 turns the question back on him, asking whether he's actually finished healing from what the Borg did to him. It's one of the most quietly brutal exchanges in the whole show. because neither of them really has a clean answer. By season 2, Seven has become captain of La Serena, and she's in a relationship with Raffi, one of Picard's closest allies. In an alternate Q-altered timeline the crew briefly travels through, Seven sees a version of herself that was never assimilated at all. A powerful political figure named President Annika Hansen, and gets a strange, bittersweet glimpse of a life entirely without the Borg. At the end of that season, back in the proper timeline, Picard does something he has the authority to do, and Starfleet bureaucracy never would. He grants Seven a field commission, putting her in temporary command of the USS Stargazer. It's unofficial. It's also the door back into Starfleet that was slammed shut 20 years earlier.
Chapter 9, Commander 7 and the Battle of Frontier Day.
Season 3 of Picard picks up with that field commission made official. Seven now holds the rank of commander and serves as first officer of the USS Titan A, under Captain Liam Shaw, who, notably, does not trust her. He insists on calling her Hansen, refusing even the basic courtesy of her chosen name. In pointed reference to her Borg past, it's the show drawing a direct line between the institutional racism Seven faced after Voyager and the kind of casual prejudice that doesn't go away just because she's finally wearing the uniform. Then, the real crisis hits. A coordinated Borg assault during Frontier Day, Starfleet's own anniversary celebration, turns into a near-catastrophic mass assimilation event. Engineered through a corrupted version of the Borg Queen herself, Seven plays a central role in the fight to stop it. At one point, momentarily linking herself into the Queen's cell to try to control the captured Borg cube without losing herself to it. A callback to the exact fear that defined her as a 6-year-old drone. She does it anyway, because lives are on the line. After the battle, with Captain Shaw among the casualties, Tuvok, now a senior admiral, promotes Seven to captain and gives her command of the Titan A, which is rechristened the USS Enterprise G. The girl who was once told she'd never be trusted in a Starfleet uniform now commands the ship that carries Starfleet's most legendary name. Picard's final scene with the crew teases a future show, Star Trek Legacy, focused on Captain Seven, First Officer Raffi, and a young Jack Crusher serving as a special counselor. As of this video, the show hasn't been picked up, but the door's very much left open to see maybe a future and beyond for 7 of 9.
Chapter 10, The Legend She Leaves Behind.
And here's a fun way to close the loop. Star Trek Discovery is set roughly 800 years after all of this, deep into the 32nd century, and in one episode, engineer Jet Reno, love her, reveals she moonlights as a bartender aboard the USS Discovery, and that her signature cocktail is something called the 7 of Limes. It's a throwaway joke. It's also, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, a remarkable piece of in-universe trivia. 8 centuries later, in a Starfleet that has lived through wars, plagues, and total social collapse, 7 of 9's name is famous enough, culturally embedded enough, to still be a pun people recognize. Whatever happens after Picard's finale, in-universe, Captain 7 of 9 apparently goes on to do something significant enough that her name outlives entire civilizations. Not bad for a girl the Borg tried to erase entirely. When you actually lay it all out, start to finish, 7 of 9's story isn't really about the Borg at all. It's about identity, it's about what's left of a person after every external label has been stripped away and reapplied against their will. Annika Hansen, 7 of 9, or just 7, Commander. Captain. Every single one of those names was, at some point, forced onto her, or fought for by her. The through line is that she never stopped insisting there was a her underneath all of it. Worth fighting for. If you want more of these complete story breakdowns, Janeway, Picard, the Borg Queen, O'Brien, all of it, just let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe and hit the like button, ring that bell. It's Albie's only job, so donate well, links below. And I'll see you on the next one. This has been Trek Exploration. I'm Albie. Live long and prosper.